To see you. There we go. This meeting is being recorded. Zoe, great to see you. Mindy, good morning from Australia. You've had a very long day, my friend, because I know you were the hostess with the mostest and the MC extraordinaire on our second global introduction yesterday. So thank you. Great to have you. Sam, wonderful. I hope the weather in Brighton is doing well. And great. We're going to give people just another minute or so to come into the room. I know that lots of people are doing sort of these back-to-back sessions, and I know there'll probably be a few people come in while we keep on rocking and rolling here. But I really would love for you guys to, as you're introducing yourself, hi Carrie, please put in the music you really like grooving to. Again, we really want to have a fun playlist coming out of this. Oh, here we go, Abigail. Xavier Rudd's Follow the Sun. Listen, I'm going to put that on like the top of the playlist because I think we all need to follow that sun. Sunscreen. All right. That'll be another one. I'm already picking up a sunshiny feel to some of the music we're going to be hearing. Oh yeah, Sophie, it looks like is agreeing. Listen, we only have a 1 hour power hour together to talk about activism in business. So I think we are going to tuck in. Please, though, as you're joining, for those who are still coming in, you guys who are here need to set the example in the chat by, making it very clear what we're keen to have are some great music recommendations. So please keep on sending them in. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to connect with personally, welcome. And this is going to be a really fun session. Really, we're going to keep it high energy, and we're going to actually do some slightly different stuff today. We're going to hear from some amazing speakers who I'm going to introduce in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about this new activist business project that we've got going on at B Lab UK. But actually, we really want to turn it over to you really quickly because we want to get your questions. Why are you here? What are the sorts of things you're interested in exploring as it relates to activism in business? And we're going to get into some breakout groups because actually we have a few questions we want you to talk about in groups. And this is part of like a bigger crowdsourcing of wisdom we're keen to do at B Lab UK. So without further ado, I think we got the numbers. The numbers are climbing here. So we're going to just kick off, keep on putting your music in there. But I'm going to kick things off actually by just speaking very briefly about the things we are going to cover. So you can kind of see them there on the slide. We have already sort of mentioned that this is going to be about sort of this activist business project and hearing the voices of those who are really doing this work as activists and as businesses that are sort of on this adventure of really understanding what it means to be an activist business. And then, of course, running these breakout groups. But if I could go to the next slide, what I'd really love to do is make sure you guys are all getting a chance to get to know who our amazing panelists are. So we're joined today by Sophie, Lawrence, also known as Larry, and Marcelo. And each of them have a really unique perspective and story they're going to share related to this topic. Now, you guys can all go off and like Google their bios, see them on LinkedIn, catch their YouTube videos, TikTok, all the works. So what I'd actually like to do is introduce each of the speaker by helping them sort of share something a little bit more human about themselves. And so what I'd love to do is maybe start with you, Sophie. And I wonder if you could just introduce yourself by what your go-to like power up music is and something that we wouldn't see on your CV or your bio, something about you that would be slightly surprising or interesting for those of us tuning in. So Sophie, do you want to go first?
Hi, yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. What a question. I was actually going for kind of my general favorite type of music is definitely kind of folky stuff from way back when. But I love the Baz Luhrmann song that's been put in the chat. Absolutely, very inspirational. Also, Flight Facilities, Foreign Language. I don't know if anyone has heard that before, but that is great. And the video is awesome. So just pop that into YouTube if you haven't heard it. It's great. It's a really good one for the summer. If it ever comes to the UK, then definitely put it on. In terms of something that isn't on my CV or that people don't know, well, I recently qualified as a psychotherapist and I want to focus on climate anxiety. So I'm actually in the process of writing some children's books, like a series of short stories for kids who might have some climate anxiety issues. So that's my summer project and that's not on my CV. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Excellent. Well, Sophie, it feels like there's a whole next session we're going to have to do at some point, which is almost like a story hour with some of the wonderful work that you're writing. So thank you for sharing that. Larry, can I turn it over to you next? What are you listening to and what's something on your CV that we might not otherwise know about?
Okay.
Not on your CV, sorry, not on your CV.
I know you said to prepare for some of this and I don't think I have, but I'm gonna wing it. at risk of trying to sound like a music snob, I'm actually going to go in and say one that popped on the other day. It was John Farnham, You're the Voice. I think what some people often coin should be the Australian national anthem, but it's got everything. It's got claps, it's got single. Yeah, John Farnham, You're the Voice. Top of the playlist.
Nice.
Interesting thing about me. Gosh. Well, you know what? Working at Finisterre, and you know, it's surrounded by the coast down here in Cornwall. We're spoiled for kind of things we can do and get in and out of the sea and spend time in on around the ocean. I think at the moment one of the things I'm trying to do is try to connect it with the sea in a way that I'm not familiar with, to kind of see it from a different perspective. At the moment I kind of throw myself in the deep end, just bought a boat, and after this I'm going to go down and learn how to sail. So yeah, something slightly scary, and but hopefully something that kind of humbles me in the process. So.
Well, excellent. I wish you well on your seafaring adventures. I wonder if there are any people that are joining us today that might have some sailing experience. Maybe there's some sailing mentorship and sailing skills that can be shared across the chat as well. Anyways, well, I hope you have a lot of fun out on those waves later on this afternoon. Thanks, Larry. Last but certainly not least, Marcelo, my friend, love for you to introduce yourself by way of your favorite music, which I have been lucky enough to be listening to actually from a previous time we've had this conversation, and also something that's not on your CV that you'd like to share.
Thanks, Char. Hello, everyone. So as you hear by my accent, I'm Brazilian. So I'll pick my favorite music out of we have a great Brazilian traditional popular music, and there is this amazing musician, which would be the Brazilian version of Paul McCartney, maybe, which is called Gilberto Gil. And Gilberto Gil has just made a new song. He's around his 70, he just turned 76. And he made a new song called Reforest. And I think it speaks very close to everything we do, everything we believe, things, the spirit of the time. And I think he's really tuned to the spirit of his time. So Reforest, Refloresta, it would be my song to pick. And about something that is not in my CV. So well, being Brazilian, I think one of them is I'm an awful football player. So I'm really bad at it. So people normally pick me up because, well, take the Brazilian guy to our team. Worst decision ever. I can barely pass the ball. But I am a reasonable cooker. So yeah, I go from cuisine to cuisine. I like to cook for many people. So to do my vegetarian barbecues for many friends. So hopefully one day we'll join in one of those.
I'm excited for that vegan, vegetarian, Brazilian barbecue. I feel like that's going to be hopefully something we have quite soon. And Marcelo, I can only imagine that you play football with the most extraordinary heart. So, it's about skill, but it's also about heart. And I imagine that you play with deep, deep heart in your football playing. Well, listen, thank you guys. This is going to be an amazing conversation. And I'm going to turn it back to the three of you in just a few minutes to get your reflections on this topic today of activism and activism in business. But to kick things off, I just want to set the scene a little bit, because some of you may know I actually recently transitioned from my role of chair of B Lab UK to a role that's been called an activist in residence. It's the first time this has happened at B Lab UK, and it's sort of a fairly new term. And so often people are asking me, so like, what does it mean to be an activist in residence? And I'll be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure that out. It's an emergent process, but it's actually based on sort of a belief. It's actually two sets of beliefs. The first is that we all, in the work that we're doing, need to all aim higher, dig deeper, move faster, and act more deliberately and intentionally together in addressing these interconnected emergencies that we're facing. And sometimes that will be with different partners than those that we are necessarily used to working with. Enter the activists, enter the social movements. The other element of this job that is really interesting to me, and I'm using almost as a guiding star, is something we've actually been hearing a lot about through this climate summit. It's that we really do need to be guided by what now we know is needed. The science is telling us very clearly, and we can feel it. We know that there is really radical levels of change that are needed in order for us to build an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system that works for everybody and for the planet. So again, this idea of really making sure that how we move forward, how we act, is driven by what is needed rather than being limited by what seems possible. Because actually what seems possible might not be actually what's needed in order to get us to really solve these problems. So those are sort of some of the guiding principles of what we're trying to do and explore as we look at activism and business. Now, the initial project that I'm spending some time on right now is called the Activist Business Project. And the way we set it up was to start with a series of hypotheses. And the first hypothesis we're in the process right now of testing is that actually within our B Corp movement, there are many, many, many incredible ways to take action and to lead. And what actually has surfaced is this idea that maybe there are many different examples, but two of them include being an evangelist business. And those evangelist businesses are super important. They're the ones who are leading through influencing and collaborating with those that are in their current system. It's about working with their employees. It's about promoting the B Corp movement to their customers, to their investors, to their supply chain. So working on systems change by sort of evangelizing what it means to be a business, using its business as a force for good. Now, there's also a form of leadership that is embracing these principles of activism and activist businesses. And that's where we're sort of mapping this being about the leadership of businesses that is developed through engaging with and collaborating with activists and social movements. It's about applying the language of activism and really channeling the intentionality of activism as well. What we have been finding is that there's a real, in these communities that sort of identify with this kind of language of activist business, there's a real focus on radical change. And these are groups of businesses and individuals that are really willing to go to the edge and take very significant risk. Now, in thinking about evangelist businesses and activist businesses as two different forms of leadership we have in the movement, there's some really important things here. One is both are critically important. We need both these forms of leadership. As well, they actually overlap. It's not like you're one form of leader and not the other. Actually, we see many businesses that are holding an ability to be both evangelist in terms of how they're promoting and working and collaborating with their current system, as well as activists in terms of how they're engaging with movements. But we also appreciate that these different leadership forms can sometimes need different forms of support. And that's where we're going to turn it over to you guys, because we want to understand from you what that sort of support might look like. Now, in terms of the project process, we are right now in what we're calling the discoveries phase, which has involved talking to a ton of B Corps as well as non-B Corps to sort of test this hypothesis. Do these forms of leadership make sense? What are the differences between them? And then really dig a little bit deeper into what it means to be an activist business. Now, a few things that we've learned so far include there are lots of different ways to think about both the concept of activism and what it means to be an activist business. So for example, and actually I'm going to call out Larry and Finisterre, because actually in one of their recent events, the C7, they created this guide to becoming an ocean activist. And actually in their C7 event, in one of the kickoff sessions, they talked about activism being about acting on something you care about and acting on it every day. So that's become like a quite foundational element of when we think about the concept of activism. When we think about activist business, it's also about sort of taking this activism and thinking about what do people within business, or what does the business itself do to activate change? And there's a great line that came up from one of our interviews, which was that actually activism is not a tool for business. Business is a tool for activism. So just again, thinking about this intentionality and this focus. Now we're going to hear today for some really great examples of how working with movements and activating in business actually happens in practice. That can happen, for example, through employees and giving them time to engage in movements. It can happen in terms of how businesses are engaging with their customers and wider community, enabling conversations on culture change. And it can happen when we start thinking about systems change. So again, working alongside activists on doing things like changing the law. Now, today is an important step in this discovery phase that I mentioned, because we are going to hear from our amazing panelists that each have a view and a perspective on this concept. But then again, we're going to crowdsource it to you, because what we want to get are the insights from all of you that are on the line today. And what we'll be doing then is taking on board all this insight, and over the next few weeks, reviewing it, analyzing it, looking for some trends, and then we'll be coming out to you all again and sharing sort of what our early thoughts are on sort of the synthesis of this process, and starting to signal what are some of the things we're going to explore at B Lab UK to do to support more of this particular form of leadership, the activist business leadership trend. Okay, so without further ado, I do now want to sort of bring back in our friends. What I would say is you have questions about B Lab UK's work around activism in business, or any of the things that our amazing panelists are going to share, please put those questions in the chat, because we're going to have some time after your breakout group to pull them out and to ask them to our panel. I'd like to sort of bring our panel back in at this stage, because there are sort of 4 things that I think would be great to explore with each of them. The 4 sort of big questions are what you all think it means to be an activist business, why in the work that you do, you feel this is needed today, how does this come to life within your organization, and where you think this is going next. So it's what, why, how, and where. And I'm going to give each of you 5 minutes to reflect on either all 4 of those questions or the one that you sort of feel most called to. And again, what I would say is please, 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 to those who are joining us from around the world today, put your questions you have for any of our panelists in the chat box, because when we come back from the breakout, we'll bring all of that back in. All right. Oh, you can see those are the breakout questions. You're getting an advanced view on what those breakout questions are going to be. All right. But let's, if we may, just spotlight back to our amazing panelists here. And maybe can I start with you, Sophie? I'll go to you first. Would you be able to riff a little bit on, again, these questions of what, why, how, and where?
Yeah, so just by chance, the rubbish collection is just kicked off on my road, which I couldn't quite control, unfortunately. So if you hear some noise in the background, that's what it is. So yeah, just firstly, for those of you who don't know what Ecosia is, we are the search engine that plants trees. We're the largest non-profit search engine in the world with 15 million, actually much over 15 million, but we're still publicly saying 15 million users across Europe and the US. And we're one of the largest tree planting organizations in the world, having now been planting trees for over 10 years in largely biodiversity hotspots. So those are places where the trees can have the biggest ecological impact, which is quite needed at this time of mass deforestation. And in terms of this question of why, well, the organization itself was set up to respond to the issue of climate change, but also deforestation specifically. And Christian, the founder 10 years ago, just took this problem, and then he looked at the biggest business model that existed at the time, which is Google, still pretty much the same now, and applied that business model to basically the problem of fighting climate change by saying that all of our revenue will go towards reforesting the planet. And basically that's why we exist. And that's what we do. And over time, we have changed a little bit insofar as now we're saying that 80% of our tree planting, 80% of our revenues go to tree planting, and the remaining 20% goes into investing in other innovations that can more quickly perhaps fight climate change, because obviously we can't click our way through the crisis. It is a crisis, and we do need urgent action and investment in real solutions that can do this. We can't just plant trees because there are so many other systemic issues at hand, and we can come back to those. So that's why we exist. That's what we do every single day. And in terms of how we do it, well, we've created a large community of engaged users. They are highly engaged. We know that they're predominantly young users as well. So we're much younger than other search engines insofar as most of our users are under the age of 35. And they are really highly principled as well. So in terms of who we partner with, the way that we work, the way that we communicate, how transparent we are, this is all very much led by the fact that our users really, really care about these issues and about good business. And for us, the risk of being a good business and an organization that really responds to problems as an activist is that we don't do anything at all. We'd rather actually do something, take a risk on that, which has paid off, I think, rather than not doing anything, because that's obviously where the biggest risk for everyone really is if we just don't engage with issues that are bigger than ourselves. So that's what we do. In terms of what our activism or how our activism manifests at Ecosia, I would say that there are really 3 key elements to it. One is really focused on our employees themselves and encouraging every single employee to be an activist in their own cause and context. So we recognize that our 70 or so employees from around the world all have issues and areas that they are specifically interested in or passionate about. And so what we do is encourage, through our structure, everyone who wants to work on something to do that. And we do that by creating budgets, which we don't have a kind of a set budget. If you have an interest in doing something, a local activation, something in your community, something that you're really passionate about, be it racial equality, social mobility, Indigenous rights, then as long as you can explain it to the rest of the team and other people to bring them along with you, then the budget is allocated towards these kinds of things. So it really empowers employees to think about what they can be doing at the local level, and also kind of lead with their own hearts as well. So just follow what they're most interested in. And that's generally how we've come up with some of our best kind of or biggest campaigns, actually. So we can come back to some of those as well. And also being community led. So working in a range of different communities. We're across 50 different countries. We work at about 9,000 different plots of land across the world, and we work with a number of different local communities to get the trees in the ground. And so we are very close to kind of what is happening in those spaces and ensuring that we are helping those communities adapt to climate change scenarios within their context, also to engage with local processes, and also to educate our users about what's happening in some of the places where we plant trees. So we're also then encouraging our users to be engaged in those processes as well, which again is a bottom-up process, which has of course also led to more activism from our side and campaigns that have been really interesting and meaningful. And had we not been listening at the local level, both to our employees and the communities, we wouldn't have picked up on some of those issues. And so actually elevating those voices is the most important thing that we can do with our activism, or that is how our activism manifests at Ecosia, I should say. And then just the last point is then, having listened at the local level, what we then do, to the extent that we can, and because we are a small team, but this is one of my roles as head of public policy, is to then package up what we're hearing on the ground from our employees and from our communities, and then take those views and take those testimonies and ideas and actually put them into key policy campaigns. And that's also, as a tech company, we obviously have a strong view in terms of what should be happening at the tech and digital level, but also when it comes to environmental and climate policy, that's incredibly important too. So my role also involves these larger advocacy campaigns, pushing for changes to legislation at the EU level, the UK level, and also in the US. And making sure that we are using the kind of the sum of all of Ecosia's resources and networks to actually push for change at those levels too. So I think there are three parts, as I said, to what we're doing here, which is two of them are bottom-up approaches, local level, listening, engaging, and then the third one is kind of what are we doing with that? How are we actually pushing for change at the national level or regional level?
Thank you so much, Sophie. I think, just being really sort of quite clear on what those different sort of levers are and almost the energy behind those levers. So bottom up, top down, and sort of the importance of really quite listening and being moved by the different inputs you're able to collect from a wide range of stakeholders. I think those are really important takeaways for all of us as we think about activism in business. So thank you, Sophie. And I'm going to move to Larry next, if I may. Larry, do you want to come in and sort of pick of those sort of four questions? The what do you do? Why do you do it? How does it actually sort of show up in your work, and where you think is going next? I know you guys have just come off of a pretty extraordinary beginning into an activist journey through the C7. So over to you to answer any or all of those questions and maybe share a bit more about what you've been up to with C7.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, my name's Lawrence. I work down here in southwest of Cornwall. For a business called Finisterre. And for those who don't know, we are a outdoor clothing manufacturer. And since day one, in terms of why I'm here today, and since day one, business of 18 years now, the whole model was founded on kind of three pillars of commitment of product, environment, and people. And those pillars, those found commitments ring truer today, and I think they probably did 18 years ago for us now. And in terms of where business is at, where the planet is at, and for us at Finisterre, kind of where, as I mentioned earlier, on our doorstep, where our ocean is at, and the role oceans play in terms of climate change, and I guess and climate agenda, and actually point to what you said a second ago was that activism is a tool, is not a tool for business, but a business is a tool for activism. I think that's really, really poignant. And I think I'll probably dive into that, the why we exist in that space at the moment, and that is the ocean's future for us is our future, and that's why we're here. We're here to inspire a love of the sea, and protect it together. What we just did recently with our C7 thing was a response to that, and we believe that if we can empower our audience with the knowledge and the skills and the scientific or the lobbying know-how, we can assist in building a huge community of activists, whether that's ocean activists or people who work up the rivers in the cities or the summits. Together we can play an effective part in securing the future of our oceans. I'll mention ocean a few times here because it really is on our doorstep. Our workshop in St Agnes looks out over the Atlantic, and it's a source of inspiration through the product we build, but also knowing what we need to do to protect that space. And it's a huge driver for what we do. The how and how we go about that, and as Sophie said, like, how does that manifest into actually taking action or putting our money where our mouth is as a business? And I think for the last 18 years, we've done an awful lot in terms of, what B Corp is, using business as a force for good. But right now, it really feels we're stepping into a space, the word activism is used a lot, the word sustainability in terms of what we do as a business, as a manufacturer of goods. And, we're adding to a problem already in terms of consumerism and, but we have a model in which we can do that differently and hopefully inspire change or, lead in innovative practices within our business models. And this activism thing's really exciting, and it is new to us, and it's scary. But we have to be bold, we have to be brave, we have to be positive and hopeful. But there's a great structure in which we do it. And again, to that point of 3, and that's enabling access to nature, to the outdoors, to the ocean, to the seas. For us, it's the sea, the ocean is second nature, but for many it's not. So, that main role of the brand is to inspire a love of the seas. And one way we can do that is to help more people experience that. Second to that is, partnership for conservation. We're a manufacturer of goods, but we're not scientists or climate scientists or ocean marine biologists. And so actually this kind of partnership for conservation is working with those expert voices, those people and organizations of authority who know their shit. And, we can be the conduit between those people and our audience who want to get involved. So partnership for conservation is a huge thing. And that ranges from grassroots organizations to, some of the bigger kind of players in the space. And then championing wider change. And that probably leads me to where we're at with what we just did with C7. I'll keep it quick, and I'm happy to answer some more questions, but it's C7 was a direct response to the G7 summit, which just took place 7 miles down the coast 2-3 weeks ago now. And that was, we could not sit by idly and watch some of the most powerful leaders in the world come and have a little bit of a beach holiday. And this, the whole thing seems like a lot of fanfare. And, we wanted to stand up and we wanted to rally behind this common denominator of every second breath comes from our oceans. And we wanted to put, ocean agenda at the front and center of climate negotiations at G7 and ahead of COP26 in November. And it was a great opportunity to light a fire under our own arse, but then also rally a like-minded community of people around, a really important cause. Maybe we'll dive into C7 again in a bit, but it can all be found online. A great tool for people to connect with.
Yes, and I would just like to sort of jump in there and say, if anyone is interested, and I know I didn't talk to you about this before, Larry, but you guys did put together, a guide to becoming an ocean activist. And I think, there's just within this some great thought. Oh, there we go, twinning. Are these still available if people are interested? Can they download them? Can they order them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that event was a real test bed for us. So it was exciting. We're a very small team, and we did as much as we could with pretty short runway.
Okay.
All downloadable, all on demand.
It's so good. So definitely tune in and check them out. I certainly love a lot of the quotes that are in here as well, and I keep on taking notes as we go through it. I'm just going to take a moment to remind people, please put your questions in the chat. We're not going to provide open space immediately after this panel. We'll do it after your breakout groups, but we want to have a sense of what kind of questions are on your mind. So if you do have things that you're feeling quite called to sort of go deeper into with Sophie, with Larry, with Marcelo, please put them in the chat. But at this stage, I want to turn it over to Marcelo. Marcelo, we're so glad you're able to join us, to speak about the Natura & Co story. And obviously recognizing Natura & Co is a huge B Corp business in this world with many different brands within it, each which have a different way to sort of approach some of the things and themes we're talking about here today. I wondered what you would reflect on when it comes to, what is an activist business? Why do businesses do this? How does it show up, and where you see things going next?
Thanks, Sharon, and great to listen to Larry and to Sophie and to get your stories and your perspectives as well, because I think it's, as both of them said, it's about like-minded business coming together. And just to tell a little bit more about who we are. So Natura started actually 50 years ago, back in Brazil, in São Paulo, when in the cosmetic sector, actually chemicals were the far front and the most where everyone was getting their heads on. And we were already counterintuitively naming ourselves Natura and basing the company out of natural ingredients, and really within the spirit of the 60s that was very strong back then. And Natura became the biggest cosmetic brand in Brazil. And by achieving that position, it decided to go overseas and to take its proposal to different audiences. So it started a partnership in 2012 with Aesop, an Australian brand that it's present here in the UK and in Europe, with a very interesting connection with communities and with architecture and natural ingredients as well. Later on, it connected to probably our biggest activist voice, which is The Body Shop. So The Body Shop is well known here in the UK. It was the first company to really start connecting grassroots NGOs, big campaigns, communications. Anita Roddick visited Natura a few times. Our founders visited The Body Shop as well. We were always like-minded, and people always would take a Natura product and say, well, it looks like The Body Shop. And then people would take a Body Shop product in Brazil and they say, well, that looks like Natura, because it was really the same spirit. So when the companies got together, I think it was a natural connection. And recently, to enlarge the social and the capacity to reach larger audiences and to go overseas even more intensively, we brought Avon on board as well with its large and wonderful network of representatives and consultants. Nowadays, we operate in 100 countries, and we do think that activism is really important to promote change in different things that are common to all our business and to everyone, which are global issues and that must be faced globally as well. And to have a voice that struggles for and proposes and shows how can we promote change in the three spheres. So on the environmental level, nowadays, you probably know that less than 5% of the top 500 Fortune companies do have net zero targets in place and do measure their emissions on common standards with science-based targets. So we're not only proposing ourselves to do that and to become net zero, not by 2050, but by 2030, so 20 years ahead of the UN pledge, but bringing that movement to others and bringing other companies who are as large as we are by clearly saying how can we do that and building collective efforts to the packaging industry, to many things that will allow that change to happen. So I think why we need to do it, because of course, I think science shows and everyone is concerned about what must change, and change is not coming in the pace that everyone is expecting. So we gotta speed up, and we gotta team up with others. So I think that answers a little bit the why and the how. But there is a how, and there is something different on activism that I think it's really specific on Natura & Co. And Char was with us last week on something that it's important to clarify, which is, from our perspective, from a company that started in a country that has the biggest biodiversity on Earth, on the Amazon forest, but is also connected to many countries with tropical forests that are being taken away and chopped down, and sometimes also in the name of progress, in the name of economy. And we can have a scenario where we'll reach all our agreements on carbon emissions, where the Paris Agreement will evolve, but we will not evolve on nature. And we will actually take nature away and chop it down by saying that, well, carbon is the most important angle. And we do think that carbon is not the only answer to climate change. And so the connection between nature and being nature positive, and the people who support that, and the true guardians of the forest are the traditional communities, people that we operate for over 30 years with. So Natura does have a lot of expertise on, probably is one of the only companies that operates in different markets, that has a team of anthropologists and social and technology developers for communities. So we can really work with them, taking products that take weeks to come out of the forest, and that respect the cycles of nature, that are not available for the whole year, that operate in a different way. So we can not only do it properly, but we can also educate our consumers who are citizens. So they become, and the awareness of how the new business model should operate, I think we will expand more and more, and we will promote the changes that we are all looking for. Finally, just to wrap up, I think there is a need nowadays for us to set value and to promote nature in a way that we know how much, as we know where we are on carbon, we should know where we are on nature and biodiversity, on a country level, on a company level as well, how we are operating with nature. So I think this is really important. This is where I would like to be within the next 10 years, for consumers to take a look at the product and see how much it costs, but also how much it costs for the climate, how much it costs for nature. So if we're able to build that, I think we'll be on better shape.
You've already then brought in like a collective action project here, Marcelo, you know, something that we get businesses collectively to come together and work with, as you say, many different sources of wisdom and many different sources of different communities that have almost different pieces of the puzzle. So thank you for bringing that in. And I would just say, anyone who's interested in sort of some of the stuff that Marcelo has shared, you know, check out the Commitments to Life. There's a really extraordinary sort of library of stories and really interesting sort of activations that have been happening. So for those of you who are interested, please check out more on Natura & Co.'s Commitment to Life. With that, I think we are at a point where it'd be really great to use the power of this collective, all of you that are joining us today, to get your thoughts on some of the questions that have surfaced. So we're going to break you into breakout groups. You're going to get a link to a Google Sheet or a Google slide, sorry. And what we're going to ask you to do is, in just small groups, you know, it's going to be random. You'll be pulled into a breakout group. Just on the Google slide, put your group number. And there's 3 questions we'd just love you to explore very briefly. Those 3 questions are: what do you think an activist business is and does? We'd also like you to know who are you seeing out there that you think are engaging in sort of some of the things that you've heard today about activists in business. And lastly, how do you think B Lab UK can support activist businesses? So again, we are going to trust the wisdom of the crowd here. And this is a really important part of the Activist in Business project, which is to collect insight and collect sort of the sort of wisdom of all of you. So there's a link. Please make sure you click on the link that's in the chat right now. Head off into your breakout groups. We're going to give you 7 minutes. So you know, make sure you give a chance to introduce each other. But if you feel so compelled by one particular question, feel free to focus there. If you want to talk about all three, please go there. But I do want you to know we are going to be looking very deeply at the notes that you put onto those slides. So please record your conversation for us. So with that, I think, Catherine, the breakout groups are going to open, and just encourage you to please follow the link, and then we'll give you a bit of a warning when we're going to pull you back. Oh, everyone's coming back. I know it's that quite like weird feeling, like we are going through a time machine or something, where you get sucked back into the main session when you're in the middle of these really quite intense and deep conversations. And I know you guys have been doing some deep conversation, because the thing with these Google slides is you can actually follow along. So I've been watching all the great conversations you're having. My one thing would be to, Sophie here, here we are using Google slides. I don't know if there's an Ecosia slides product in development, but just saying that we could use Ecosia slides down the line as well, hopefully. But thank you all. And I'm going to just say a giant, deeply felt thank you, because I am going to spend a lot of time reviewing sort of your amazing notes. So feel free to keep on putting things in there as they come through. Because we don't have a ton of time left in our session, what we're going to do is make sure a commitment to you all. So we're going to reflect on them, and we're going to send you back a sort of set of the insights that has sort of surfaced from your conversation. So just massive gratitude and thank you for taking that time to meet one another, to chat about these themes, and to share a few points that sort of surfaced for you in this process. Now, some of you guys have asked some really great questions in the chat. We only have, just over sort of 5 minutes left to go before I know people will be zooting off to their next meeting or their next Zoom session. But what I'd like to do is just sort of ask, I'd like to pose the 3 questions that have come through, and actually use it also as a chance to invite our speakers to address the question they feel called to, but also to share any concluding thoughts from their perspective on what they think B Lab UK can do to support and serve more activist businesses, be they B Corps or otherwise. So maybe can I start? Let me just share the 3 questions that came out was, how do you measure your activism impact? How important is it to calculate the opportunity cost in business statute? So carbon tax was an example. And whether or not there's any advice for any ground level employees to be able to influence the leadership within their companies in order to take more action in sort of the business activist space. So great questions. And maybe can I turn it to you first, Sophie? Do you want to speak to any of those questions and share what your sort of advice is to B Lab UK on how we can be of most support to you and the important work you're doing at Ecosia?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the question on how do you define success or measure it, I think is really important, because I mean, a lot of these things that we're campaigning for are huge topics which do involve systems change. And I think we need to aim high and hold governments to account, really, and support movements on the ground. So I think that for us, at least at Ecosia, over the last 10 years, we have had significant success, actually. We managed to save a forest called the Hambach Forest in Germany by offering to buy it when a large extractives company tried to buy it. We basically did some community kind of organizing, and we got we put in a price for it, which ultimately stopped the whole process and saved the forest. We've been really involved in something which I know is happening in the UK, that Shah, that you're leading with the Better Business Act. We have a similar thing in Germany around changing the classification of purpose-driven companies in Germany, which now has over 500 business signatures, and legislators from all across the different party spectrums in Germany are supportive of it. So that's really promising. And we've made some quite big changes at the EU level with regards to Google's monopolistic practices. So that's a real win. So that's, you can define success in legislative change, and that can happen. But also we don't need to be spearheading everything. This is much, much bigger than ourselves. So I think it's easy with the environmental movement to feel exhausted by it, the task is so huge, and also not to celebrate the successes that we have made as a collective who are pushing for change. So I think taking time to celebrate those changes and knowing that you played a part in it in whichever way you did, whether that's through social media or other ways to support things like Fridays for Future or other campaigns and movements. I think it's also important to think of successes and define success at a global level. So not just feeling like, oh, we as a company haven't done enough, because there's always more you can do. So I think sometimes being a bit kinder to ourselves on it as well is important. In terms of what B Corp can do, just really quickly, I know we're running out of time, and I think just helping us coordinate more. I think the fact that So many cool organizations are doing great things. It is awesome if we can coordinate to really push for change and sometimes package up some of the developments or some of the views and opinions to make sure that is taken to the government level, for example. I think that would be really helpful. So yeah, just helping us coordinate would be really, really helpful.
Terrific. Thank you, Sophie. And I think that's something that's come in from through the Google Slides. So so great. And we'll definitely be taking that on board. Larry, can I get your response to any of those sort of questions that surfaced in your closing words in terms of what we can do at B Lab UK? And I'm just going to say quite brief. We've only got sort of 4 minutes left, and actually we have time for Marcelo's reflections too here. Oh, Larry, you're on mute. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says that.
Still haven't managed it. Yeah, terrible. I mean, one of the things when we looked at great other brands around us, both in, you know, our immediate kind of realm, clothing. You cannot have these discussions without talking about the likes of Patagonia, who, you know, 40 plus years have really set the bar, and it's, you know, they're a great example and a business model to follow. They've got, you know, it's a huge business in comparison to what we are, but they, you know, what they've done to date is incredible, and, you know, the way they've redirected their business to far more of a political stance is very brave, and so, you know, great there. But then we also look outwards of our immediate realms, and B Corp businesses alone, big and small, of every scale, do great things, and in terms of you know, rallying behind a cause or really standing for something. And one of the things we just discussed in that little break off was really knowing your lane, knowing where you you know, where you can apply your skills, your know-how, and then I don't know whether valid to that point, but, you know, one of the things we really try to do is just don't be scared to test stuff. You know, it's about, you know, our founder Tom Kay will attest to this, and it's you know, he'd much rather sit down and talk about his failures and what's gone wrong and the lessons learned from that, and then coming back stronger, or, you know, the resilience both of you know, the business and people and nature is kind of paramount in that. So yeah, really yeah, our founder in that space is yeah, pretty clued into that, and he would say, if he was here now, he'd say that he feels the business is only really just getting going now. After 18 years, it genuinely feels now it's starting to have real direction again. So it's, yeah, great. And then yeah, what B Lab can do, I think B Lab, B Corp, UK, US, just incredible, holding us accountable, making us jump through the hoops of, you know, reapplication. And, you know, in terms of this business and activism, I think just making sure we put our money where our mouth is, and you know, whether that's what we've just set up the other month, Finisterre Foundation, which is, you know, allow an ocean access for all, to, you know, whatever else. In B Corp doing a tremendous job.
Brilliant. And I would say put the links in. Anyone who would like to follow up further on any of these things, please put on links in the chat so people can catch them. Marcelo, my friend, I would love to offer the final word to you. Are there any of these questions that have resonated with you? And I think what advice do you have? What would you like to see B Lab UK do more to support the work of activist businesses?
So thank you so much for the invitation. I think it was a great session. In our discussions, we were talking about how to reach consumers and citizens clearly. I think B Corp is doing a great job on it. So I think it's really for us to align a little bit more, which are the main messages that business can really drive in terms of change. And we'll have great opportunities ahead. COP26 will be a major moment where we'll connect probably more business, NGOs, citizenship, and the framework of what the future can look like. So reaching an agreement on nature and placing carbon seriously in our companies, I think, will be wonderful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I suspect that this is the first of many, many conversations we will be continuing to have within the B Corp movement and beyond, in terms of the role of activist businesses and how we can all support one another on this journey. We are at time, my friends, so I would like to end with just immense gratitude. Thank you to all of you for joining us and being so generous in sharing your insights and being a part of this activist business project by contributing your thoughts. I really want to thank our incredible panelists who have been so genuine and really sharing sort of the who, what, where, when, and how, so that we can all learn as part of a collective on this journey of again, activism and business as a leadership approach. And then last but not least, to the incredible, brave and bold B-Lab UK team, those who have been involved in helping organize this event, and overall the team itself, which is engaging in these really sort of interesting, new and different conversations. Just thank you, Jess, Catherine, Kate, as well as everyone else from the B-Lab UK's team that's here on the call today. Just huge, huge gratitude. I'm going to leave you with one last thing, which is, when it comes to being an activist in business, it is about how you show up. And, I'm here today wearing my sort of activist t-shirt, Rain, Rain, Go Away, from the acid rain movement. It was actually a t-shirt my dad used to wear when he was an activist in the 60s and 70s in Canada. And I've got my blazer on it with my little SDG pin. And on the back, I have my sort of marker from a protest that I was at. And it just always reminds me when I wear this jacket, it's like, yes, we can be business people. We can wear our business uniform and we can activate. It's absolutely about being both and. So with that, I wish you all a really wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, and we will definitely be in touch. Massive gratitude again to our incredible panelists, to all of you for joining, and to the amazing B-Lab UK team. Thank you all, and have a really wonderful rest of your day.